Okay, so from the first video I did on Soft White Underbelly and Mark Laita, I basically said that I think the channel is important, but there are some questions about Mark, and some of the questions that he asks in the interviews seem off. Sometimes his personality seems a little bit off, and as time goes on, we're seeing more and more of that personality, and there's more and more questions that are starting to crop up, both for myself and other people. So basically, there's this recent interview, Oceania, as you can see, and he pinned a certain comment, which was very angry, insulting, and for someone to pin a comment is basically like endorsing it. It's like, I pinned this comment because this person is saying what I'm thinking. And the comment was very insulting towards people that wanted to express empathy or concern for this person, Oceania, and just really angry in tone. And so we got to wonder why Mark would be angry at people for expressing empathy towards his subjects. I mean, you go and ask them all these questions about being molested and raped as kids and beaten and abandoned and all the horrible things that have happened to them, and then you're going to turn around and get angry when people express sympathy, empathy, and concern for them? So here is the comment, and I'll just go ahead and tell you, I checked back and this comment has now been deleted. Okay, as you can see, it had 117 replies, and that was 2 days ago when I first took this. Probably got over 200 replies before Mark decided to cover his tracks and delete the comment, because a lot of people were questioning why he would pin such an incredibly angry and juvenile and defensive comment. So you can read it for yourself, but I'll read it to you. Here's the comment. She's laughing a lot. There seems to be a problem here. You want to be psychologists are so effing pathetic, and it's sickening! Exclamation point. I know people who laugh a lot, and that is just their personality! Exclamation point. Not everyone is unhappy and depressed. Some people are just okay. Not everyone is looking for your bitch ass sympathies. FOH. And for those that don't know, FOH means F out of here. So that is a whole lot of cursing and anger out of one comment. And so angry at people who express sympathy for this girl who's telling her life story of being raped and molested and all this other stuff. Isn't that odd? Why does this make you angry? And especially for Mark, who's interviewing all these people, why would it make him angry enough to pin this type of comment? So, as I said, he did delete the comment, so I think he thought better of it eventually. After 200 replies or something, a lot of people had something to say about this, and I'm not the only one. You really have to wonder what this anger is towards us so-called wannabe psychologists. First of all, it doesn't take a psychologist to see that someone who has been molested and raped and then ends up as a prostitute is probably got some issues going on. No matter how smiley and bubbly they are to you when you're in the interview with them, okay? I mean, for one thing, you're interviewing prostitutes. Do prostitutes get their business by looking sad and frowning and crying? No. Prostitutes get their business by smiling and being bubbly and making people think that they enjoy it. And aren't you just basically giving these prostitutes free advertisement? So isn't it in their financial interest to come on here and look bubbly and happy? Okay, that's one thing. I don't know how that could go over your head, Mark. Second of all, how many of these interviews have you done? Haven't you seen the pattern over and over and over again? that all these girls who end up as prostitutes were freaking molested as children? Has that somehow managed to miss you? You didn't notice that? But then you get angry because people point out the obvious, and then you call us wannabe psychologists. It doesn't take a psychologist to see this. People get molested, not just women, men too. They get molested as children, and then they end up as prostitutes, or worse, drug addicts. I mean, is it really a coincidence? Do you think that all these people who got molested end up as prostitutes? Do you not see that if you try to normalize this and say, hey, she's fine, she's happy, how dare you say she's not happy? How dare you pass judgment on her? Nobody's trying to pass judgment on her, dude. And maybe she is happy that day. So what? That's not the point. The point is, she's being a prostitute because she was molested as a child, and the other point is that prostitution is not healthy. It's not a healthy line of work. Do I need to get into all the reasons why prostitution is not a healthy and safe line of work? Do I really need to do that? Mark, why are you trying to make this a thing with normalizing prostitution? Our media does this every day. Tries to make prostitution look fun and exciting, and ooh, you get the bag and all this stuff. It's not about, oh, you think she'd be happier working at Burger King? No, it's not about that either, because no one's happy working at Burger King either. Don't try to change the subject. It's not and this thing with the bitch ass sympathies. I mean, God, you get angry at people for showing sympathy to a woman who was molested as a child and who's a drug addict prostitute. This is the owner of this channel letting this person speak for him in a passive-aggressive way to insult his own audience. Instead of saying it himself, he's going to pin this comment, this angry comment, calling everyone who expresses sympathy a wannabe psychologist who's effing pathetic, and nobody wants your bitch-ass sympathies. Really, Mark? That's what you're about, huh? And you know what? He did this on another recent video too. And I checked, and that one he didn't take the comment down. So we're going to talk about that too. This whole thing about wannabe psychologist, armchair psychologist, do you have a psychology degree? First of all, I commented to Mark and said, why don't you get some actual psychologists? Why don't you get some actual therapists, some actual social workers who know the territory of what happens with these prostitutes and how they came to be prostitutes? And why don't you get their opinion instead of sitting there passive-aggressively insulting us, calling us wannabe psychologists for pointing out something that's obvious? Well, it should be obvious to you since you've interviewed so many of these people. But apparently it's not obvious to you. Let me fill in the blanks for you, okay? People who are sexually molested at a young age often become very promiscuous. Isn't that the word you like to use, Mark? Promiscuous? Another word could be hypersexual. But the truth is, they're just desensitized to it. Whereas a healthy way to approach sex would be to get into a relationship with someone. Get to know them first, maybe, before you have sex, potentially bringing a child into this world. You don't think people should know who they're having kids with? What do you think happens to the children of these prostitutes? Do you think that they have great lives? Do you think that there's no harm, no foul for the kids that have prostitute parents? You know, a lot of serial killers, including Charles Manson, had prostitutes for moms. Marinate on that for a minute before you pass judgment on us wannabe psychologists. What are all these comments with the inner psychologist thing? I think people are so desensitized now that it just really seems normal to them. I think a lot of people have grown up in environments where prostitution is common. They see it on television, it's glamorized. And nowadays they're even trying to make prostitution like it's empowering. It's empowering? No, I'm going to talk about that in my next video. We're going to talk about this whole happy hooker phenomenon in my next video. But for now, let's just talk about Mark Laita and the fact that he seems to have an agenda here about wanting to pass off this myth of the happy hooker. Okay? And maybe she is happy. Maybe she was having a good day. Or maybe she's just acting, like I said, because she's trying to drum up business. You know, right? Because you went home with her that night, Mark. Did you go home and you saw what happened behind closed doors with these prostitutes who come on and they're all smiling and bubbly and outgoing? Do you know how they are when they're not on camera? You really think you can tell how they are just from what they did in a public interview and how they behaved? You don't know how someone really is until you live with them behind closed doors. Ask their children how they really are. The ones who have them, and most of them do. Here's another, look at this comment. I agree. I actually think she's happy. I'm sure she has her moments, but for the most part, she seems confident in what she's doing. First of all, it's not about whether she's happy or not. Maybe she is happy because she's so desensitized to the harm that she's doing to herself. Yes, she is doing harm to herself. Prostitution is not a healthy thing. On any level, mentally, physically, any level, is it healthy for you? So that's one thing we can say, is that there are a lot of people in the comments agreeing with Mark. And look, he loved that. He loved that comment about the inner psychologist. He agrees with it. He agrees with the person that he pinned. And you know, we saw something else from Mark recently in the interview that he did with a guy named Tommy. And in this interview, Mark did not come off very well. He came off as angry, defensive, emotional, passive-aggressive, and really quite immature. And I think that's what we're seeing here with this comment. I mean, if nothing else, you can say that that comment is extremely immature. All the F words and all the exclamation points and just insulting. I mean, is that really the tone you want to take towards people that are expressing sympathy, towards the people that you interview on your channel and ask them to talk about their deepest childhood pain? You know, my first reaction would be to someone who's trying to say, oh, look, she's happy. She's happy, man. How dare you try to be an armchair psychologist and judge her, pass judgment on her. My first reaction would be, this is someone who goes to prostitutes and wants to justify it. That would be my first reaction. But I think it's deeper than that. I think it has to do with our society and where we're at right now, and the fact that nobody's happy. Relationships are falling apart. Relationships are becoming more transactional. There are very few stable families. There are very few stable communities. But just the fact that this is now becoming the norm does not make it healthy. Okay? And I think that's what a lot of these comments are coming from, because they're growing up because they're growing up in situations where they have these instabilities. They have unhappy childhoods. They've been the subject of molestation. And so they're seeing their self in this woman, Oceania, who's putting a brave face on it. And yes, she seems to be coping pretty well. Good for her. Good for her. But at the end of the day, it's not about whether she's happy being a prostitute. I seriously doubt she's truly happy being a prostitute. But if she is, it's not about that anyway. It's about the fact that all these women who were molested end up as prostitutes. Therefore, if you normalize prostitution and say there's nothing wrong with it, you are essentially normalizing pedophilia, child rape, because that's what created them. That's what turned them into prostitutes. That's what put them in a mental state to where having sex is emotionless. It's just an act. They have no deeper connection with their partners. It's just have sex, get the money, get a nut, and be out. And that is not healthy. It's not healthy. Children need a family structure, at least 2 parents, but really they need more than that. They need a whole family and a community around them to raise healthy children. So a prostitute having a kid by a trick or by some guy she has on the side, that's not healthy for the kid. Here's another comment. Shelly Lumpkins, and this comment gets pinned. Yep, I got my suspicions about Mark too. Keep in mind that all these comments have now been deleted. The comment that Mark originally had pinned is now gone, and all these hundreds of replies to it are also gone. So just to wrap this up, Mark, I said this before. I commented to you. I addressed you directly. I tried to be constructive. I said, look, buddy, you've been doing this for a while. You got 1,000 interviews. Maybe, just maybe, it's time for you to step your game up. Sit down with some actual psychologists, actual psychoanalysts, actual therapists. Instead of sitting here calling us names, saying, oh, you're a fake psychologist, well, why don't you sit down with some actual psychologists and increase your own knowledge, increase your own empathy, increase your own understanding of this situation, since you don't seem to have it. Here's another one. Seems like he co-signs a lot of this. What is Mark into? He really thinks smiling, laughing, and giggling means you're at peace within. She is not happy. This is not her life dream. Of course it's not. Of course it's not. So I'm just going to wrap this up by saying, Mark, for you to try to take this stance that these prostitutes are happy and they're living their best life, you are trying to normalize pedophilia. Yep, I said it. Because you know, and I know, and everyone that has been watching this channel knows that all these people were molested. So if you sit there and say that it's fine and they're living their best life and they're happy and they're successful and they're empowered, then you're saying that it's okay to molest children because that's how they got that way. Think about it. This is the Great Plague. We are living in the Great Plague. And I thought, Mark, that you were here to help stop the spread of the Great Plague. But now I see that you don't understand anything. And that your somewhat distant and inappropriate comments, especially towards the young women on this channel, are coming from a place of denial and ignorance and self-indulgence and immaturity. So just stay tuned. People don't change. So we're going to see more of Mark as time goes on, you know, especially at his age. He looks like he's probably early 50s. You know, people don't change. You're going to see more and more of Mark's personality as this goes on. Stay tuned. I know I will be. This is the Great Plague. And those who try to sweep it under the rug, you made yourself an enemy out of me.